There is a vehicle that has been in production since 1977, nearly 50 full years. Back in '77, Star Wars was hitting theaters, Apple Computer had just been founded, disco was king, and the Cold War was at its peak. And somewhere in the Soviet Union, at a factory in Tolyatti, a small boxy vehicle was rolling off the assembly line. Nobody knew it then, but this vehicle would outlast the Soviet Union itself. It would scale impossible mountains, cross devastating deserts, survive Antarctica for over a decade, compete in the world's most brutal rally, and it is still being built today, almost completely unchanged. But before we dive into this fascinating story, if you love content about legendary vehicles and automotive history, subscribe to the channel right now and give this video a like. Because we're about to discover how a Soviet vehicle changed off-roading forever. Now let's get into it. This isn't a story about absolute perfection. It's the story of a vehicle so fundamentally perfect in its simplicity that technological progress couldn't improve upon it. A vehicle designed for one purpose that turned out to be perfect for 1,000 others. A vehicle that became a legend not by being the best, but by refusing to die. This is the story of the Lada Niva. The Soviet 4x4 that time forgot. Or perhaps time simply gave up on trying to kill it. The problem of 1971. In 1971, Premier Alexei Kosygin had a serious problem. Party officials in rural areas couldn't do their jobs properly. They couldn't reach the farmers, they couldn't inspect collective farms, and they couldn't deliver supplies to remote villages. The roads were in terrible shape. Sometimes there weren't even roads, just mud, snow, and rugged terrain. The cars available just weren't cutting it. The Zhiguli was fine for Moscow, but it was useless in the countryside. The Moskvich was slightly better, but still struggled. The Zaporozhets was a joke on unpaved roads. The only vehicles that actually worked were the massive UAZ military trucks. Heavy, slow, and uncomfortable. They got the job done, sure, but they weren't exactly what you'd want to drive every day. Kosygin made a call. He summoned the designers at VAZ, the Volga Automotive plant in Togliatti. The mission: create a civilized four-wheel drive vehicle. Something for the people keeping the Soviet Union alive, but who lived far from the cities. Design at VAZ. A specialized team was formed under chief designer Vladimir Soloviev. The factory had already maintained a close relationship with Italy's Fiat for years. Their Zhiguli models were based on proven Fiat designs. They knew exactly how to build reliable passenger cars. Now they needed to figure out how to make a passenger car go anywhere in the vast Soviet territory. The first prototype appeared in 1971, the E2121. The team nicknamed it the Crocodile because of its looks. No roof, no doors, just a basic chassis with wheels and an engine. It was purely functional, built to test the concept. Testers even put fake badges on the prototypes. The badges said Formica, which means ant, a defunct company. When people asked what they were testing, the team made up elaborate stories about foreign vehicles. The project was top secret. No one outside the program knew what VAZ was building. Everyone agreed the Crocodile was too utilitarian. But the concept worked perfectly. The four-wheel drive system performed. The vehicle handled rough terrain. The core idea was solid. In 1973, a new and improved prototype emerged. The E2121. This one had doors and a hard-top roof. It looked like a real vehicle you'd actually want to drive. The designers themselves described it as a Renault 5 sitting on a Land Rover chassis, combining the comfort of a small European hatchback with serious off-road capability. That was the ambitious vision. The body was completely new, designed from scratch specifically for this project. But underneath, the components came from existing, battle-tested Lada models. The engine came from the VAZ 2103 and later the 2106. The mechanics were proven in millions of vehicles, reliable and easy to fix in any shop. The four-wheel drive system was the true innovation. Permanent 4WD, not a part-time system you engage only when needed. Always on, always ready. A transfer case with low-range gearing and a lockable center differential. Independent front suspension with coil springs. A rigid rear axle. Ground clearance of 220 millimeters, nearly 9 inches. The testing was brutal. Teams took prototypes to the Ural Mountains, Siberia, the deserts of Kazakhstan, and the Pamir Mountains. Temperatures ranged from -54 degrees to 40 degrees Celsius. The results were staggering. The prototype tackled 58% inclines. It waded through 2 feet of water and plowed through deep mud and snow. Vladimir Soloviev passed away in 1975. Engineer Pyotr Prusov took over as chief designer. Prusov would become the public face of the project for over 40 years. On April 5, 1977, mass production began. It was the first mass-produced unibody off-roader. What rolled off the line was revolutionary, but not because it looked high-tech. The Niva was boxy, utilitarian, and simple, but beneath that simple exterior was something that had never been mass-produced before. A full unibody off-road vehicle. Every serious off-roader used a body-on-frame chassis. Land Rover, Jeep, Toyota Land Cruiser, all of them. A heavy steel frame with the body mounted on top. The Niva didn't have a separate frame. The body and chassis were integrated into a single unibody structure, just like a passenger car. This made it significantly lighter. Weighing just over a ton, it was much lighter than its frame-based competitors. It featured a 1.6-liter inline-4 engine, fed by a simple carburetor. It pushed out 75 horsepower and 126 newton-meters of torque. Not powerful by Western standards, but enough to get the job done. The transmission was initially a 4-speed manual, later upgraded to a 5-speed for better efficiency. The permanent 4-wheel drive system featured 3 differentials: front, rear, and center. Again, it was permanent, not a part-time setup, always engaged, always ready for any terrain. 3 levers in the cabin controlled everything. One for the main gearbox, another to lock the center differential for a 50-50 power split between the front and rear axles, and a third for the transfer case to switch between high range for the road and low range for off-roading. But no electronic aids whatsoever, no traction control, no ABS, just simple, functional mechanics. The interior was basic. Hard plastics, simple gauges, bench seats. But it had real acoustic and thermal insulation. A heater that actually worked, even in Siberia. Room for 4 adults, though the back seat was tight. A rear hatch that opened to a small trunk. Everything you needed, nothing you didn't. Conquering Europe. The 1978 Paris Motor Show, the Lada Niva, made its long-awaited international debut. Western journalists and industry experts approached it with deep skepticism. A Soviet off-roader made by the same company that built Fiat knockoffs. This should be interesting, they all thought. Then, they actually drove it. The Niva was not fast at all. It hit a top speed of 130 kilometers per hour in optimal conditions. Accelerating from 0 to 60 took forever. On paved roads, the ride was rough, the steering was heavy, and the noise level was high. By Western comfort standards, the Niva was primitive. But off-road, the Niva completely transformed. It was like a different vehicle. The independent front suspension worked beautifully. The short wheelbase and high ground clearance cleared obstacles with surprising ease. Permanent all-wheel drive provided constant traction on any surface. The low range crawled over terrain that stopped other vehicles in their tracks. And its lightweight meant you could often just push it out of trouble if it got stuck. 2 people could literally move it. Within months, the Niva captured 40% of the European 4x4 market. 40% of the market. Absolutely no one saw that coming. Land Rover had dominated that segment for decades. Suddenly, a Soviet vehicle was eating a huge chunk of their market share. the Niva became Lada's best-selling export. By the early 1980s, roughly 80% of production was heading to foreign markets. The vehicle was sold under different names depending on the country: the Lada Sport in Iceland, the Lada Tiga in Austria, and the Lada Cossack in the UK. But it sold everywhere. Why did it sell so well? Simple economics. The Niva cost a fraction of what Land Rover charged and a fraction of what Toyota asked for a Land Cruiser. It offered permanent four-wheel drive and serious off-road capability for very little money. Parts were cheap. The mechanics were so simple that any competent mechanic could work on them. Was it perfect? No. Build quality was hit or miss. Rust appeared quickly. But it worked. And it kept working. Extreme testing. Antarctica, 1990. The Soviet Antarctic expedition needed a vehicle for their research station. They sent a standard Niva, slightly modified. Extra heating, extra insulation, basic prep. That Niva operated for over 10 years in Antarctica. From 1990 to 2001, it covered over 40,000 kilometers in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. 1998 Mount Everest. A stretched Vaz 2131 Niva climbed to base camp at 5,200 meters above sea level. A year later, another Niva reached 5,725 meters. That was the highest point ever reached by a motorized vehicle at the time. These weren't specially designed machines. They were production Nivas with minor modifications. The story of the Dakar. January 1979, the first ever Paris-Dakar rally. 5 private teams showed up with Lada Nivas. Most people laughed at these little Soviet boxes competing against rally machines. This was going to be a disaster. 2 teams finished. Jean Paul, the French Lada importer, saw potential. In 1981, Paul entered 2 factory cars. The Nivas were modified, plastic hoods and doors to shed weight, extra protection, and upgraded suspension. However, the engines remained almost stock. Jean-Claude Briavoine and André Trossat finished 3rd overall. 3rd place in the Dakar with a 75-horsepower Niva. In 1982, Briavoine and Delelis finished 2nd overall. 2nd place, a Lada Niva, almost won the Dakar rally. For years, the Niva competed in the Dakar, always pulling in solid finishes. It survived brutal terrain thanks to simplicity and reliability, rather than raw power and technology. That legacy lives on. In 2022, the Niva Red Legend team brought a Niva back for the Dakar Classic. Life after the Soviet Union. December 1991. The Soviet Union dissolved. For many Soviet companies, this was the end. The centrally planned economy collapsed. The Niva survived. Production continued. Demand stayed strong. Throughout the 90s, improvements came gradually. Fuel injection replaced carburetors. A 5-speed transmission became standard. General Motors even formed a joint venture with Automotive. The original Niva became the Lada 4x4 in 2006. In 2002, the Russian Safety Assessment Program tested the Lada 4x4. The result was 0 stars out of 4, but people kept buying it. Not for safety, but for capability, simplicity, and that character no modern vehicle can replicate. In 2014, the Lada 4x4 Urban appeared with more modern styling. In 2015, the Lada 4x4 Bronto targeted off-road enthusiasts with bigger wheels and all-terrain tires. In January 2021, the vehicle officially became the Lada Niva Legend. Legend, a fitting name for a vehicle approaching 45 years of continuous production. By the end of 2020, approximately 650,000 Lada Nivas had been sold worldwide. Why does it endure? In 2016, Land Rover discontinued the Defender after 68 years. The Lada is still going. It has become the longest-running mass-production light off-roader still made in its original form. The 1977 design is still in production today, in 2026. How? Why does a Soviet-era design outlive a Land Rover? The Niva succeeds because it doesn't try to be everything to everyone. It's not comfortable on the road, it's not fast, it's not luxurious. And it's not particularly safe by modern standards. It makes no apologies for these things. What the Niva does is go anywhere with the reliability at a minimal cost. That mission hasn't changed in nearly 50 years. Every modern SUV has moved up market, adding technology, complexity, and higher price tags. The Niva stays simple, mechanical, repairable, affordable, capable. The unibody construction that seemed risky in 1977 eventually became the norm. Today, every modern crossover and SUV uses this type of construction. The Niva was decades ahead of its time. Even the name Niva tells a story. In Russian, it means crop field, but it also comes from an acronym, the initials of the children of chief designers Pyotr Prusov and Vladimir Soloviev. The vehicle bears the names of the future, a future that arrived and stayed. The character of the Niva. Talk to anyone who has owned a Niva for years. They will tell you exactly the same thing without exception. It's uncomfortable on paved roads. The ride is harsh, the steering requires physical effort, and everything vibrates constantly. Fuel economy is terrible by modern standards. The heater either works too well or not at all. Build quality is questionable at best. Panel gaps vary wildly from one vehicle to the next. Rust appears immediately if you live near saltwater. The interior looks like it was designed in the 70s because it literally was. Plastic parts creak, the seats are stiff. The noise level is high on the highway. Then ask them if they'd buy another Niva. Most say yes without a second's hesitation. The Niva has real character. That overused word has a special meaning here. The vehicle has a unique personality, memorable quirks, a soul if a machine can have one. It doesn't pretend to be sophisticated or refined. It's honest about what it is. On asphalt, the Niva is rudimentary and crude. Off-road, it is absolutely brilliant. The transformation is immediate and dramatic. The heavy steering becomes an asset, providing direct feedback. The firm ride soaks up obstacles without breaking a sweat. The narrow track fits into tight spaces. Its lightness allows it to reach places where heavier vehicles sink. Simplicity is refreshing in the modern age. 3 mechanical levers, a manual transmission you can feel in your hand. Everything is mechanical, no electronics. No computers deciding when to apply power, no stability control interfering with your actions, no touchscreens, just you, the machine, and the terrain. You drive the Niva, you don't just steer it. You feel every rock, every bump, every different surface. When something breaks, you fix it. Parts are available, repair manuals exist. You don't need a laptop to diagnose problems. A basic toolkit and some mechanical know-how will solve most of them. This is vital in remote areas. It's vital in countries without a massive dealer network. It's vital for those who want to maintain their own vehicles. The Niva is a tool. Tools should be repairable. Mint condition Nivas have become collector's items. Enthusiasts restore them, modify them, and yet, you can still buy a brand new one. Visit a Lada dealer in Russia. Buy a brand new Niva Legend. Drive a vehicle virtually identical to the one that rolled out of the factory in 1977. How many products can claim that? In a world of computerized, refined vehicles that isolate you from the driving experience, the Niva is an anachronism. Crude, direct, uncompromising. It is exactly what it promises to be, and nothing more. And perhaps that's why progress could never beat it. Progress moved toward complexity, technology, and refinement. But some problems don't require complex solutions. Sometimes all you need is simple, reliable, mechanical capability. The Niva solved that problem in 1977. Nearly 50 years later, the solution still works. Progress never found a better answer because the answer was already right. The Soviet Union is gone. The Cold War is ancient history. The world has changed completely. And somewhere, a Niva is climbing a mountain, crossing a desert, or working at a remote station. It's carrying people who need to get somewhere difficult. And doing exactly what it was designed to do. Refusing to give up, refusing to become obsolete. Simply being a Niva. That is the legacy. Not perfection, not sophistication, just honest capability that time cannot diminish. If this story of the vehicle that defied time inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more content on automotive legends and hit that like button. Let me know in the comments if you knew the story of the Niva or if you've ever driven one. I'll see you in the next video.